Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Duality of Life podcast. So beyond grateful that you're here joining me for this one. It is a little bit windy outside and I do live in the city, so my apologies for any weird audio things throughout this one. However, today we're diving into something a little bit deep, something that's quite sentimental to my heart, and that's the topic of why you keep going back to him. Girl. I know you, I am you, I see you, I feel you, I've been there recently. It happens. It happens, and this is life, and you are not weird, you are not broken, you are not this horrible person that can't get themselves together. You are not any of these things, and I just really want to clarify that to begin with, because there have been way too many times I have felt so utterly and completely disgusted with myself, feeling like, oh, everyone else is getting married or everyone else is in a long-term relationship. Why can I just not figure my stuff out? Why am I just so traumatized? Why am I so broken? All of these horrible narratives. And yes, we are getting deep today. I am going to call you out on your shit. This is not a simple little breezy where you're perfect and don't worry, just manifest your love. I am giving you practical tips. I'm seeing you. I am calling your shit out because we want to deal with this. But in it, we want to accept ourselves. We want to see ourselves. We want to understand ourselves. And that, I think, is actually the key. The understanding of ourselves is to be curious about ourselves, and it's not to just get validation from somebody saying oh yeah, you're perfect, so don't worry, you don't have to fix yourself or do anything other than what you're doing, and it's all good. It's fine. It's just because men are trash. Yeah, some men are trash. Some men are trash. Okay, we get it. But some women are trash as well. Some people in general are just not great human beings. It doesn't mean that they don't have potential. It doesn't mean if they didn't put work into themselves, they could change. It doesn't mean if they had, the right structure and the right some mentor or teacher to guide them, they couldn't be a wonderful human being. We all have potential, but it's about being curious. It's about putting discipline and just slowly working through these things. Not everything comes up all at once and we can fix it all at the same time. There's little tidbits, because I think if everything came up all at once, we'd be so overwhelmed that we could just not deal with it. So one relationship is going to reveal this part of ourselves. Another relationship is going to reveal this other part of ourselves. This book that we read is going to give us this insight. This podcast that we listen to is going to give us this insight. It's a slow process of being curious and trying to understand who we are. So for this one, I've got 4 points, each with their own subpoints. And the 4 categories that we're going to be talking about today are: it's not all bad, ego protection, the illusion of control, and masochism. Stay tuned for masochism. It's a little bit of a different one than any of the first 3, but I think could be extremely profound for some people. Before we dive into this, though, I do just want to say who this episode is not for. This is not for long-term relationships or marriages where you're in a little bit of a rocky point and you're debating what to do next. This is not for you. This is for the girly that's been seeing a guy for a few months, 6 months, maybe a year, 2 max. This is for somebody that has just been in and out of a toxic relationship of, I love you one moment and now we're not going to speak for 2 weeks. And now I love you again. And now let's do this together. Let's go on vacation together. Let's not do any of that anymore. It's just chaotic. The relationship that you are in is chaotic and you don't know what to do. This is who the episode is for. Not for people that have been in very long-term relationships, not for people that are in marriages, especially not for people in marriages with children. I don't have experience in that. And also, this is not for abusive relationships, whether that's physically, sexually, or emotionally. The first topic is, it's not all bad. No, of course it's not all bad. You're reasonable, smart, amazing, in their unique way, we all have our problems, person. You probably wouldn't get into a relationship with somebody if it was all bad all of the time. that would just be crazy. There was probably a little bit of love bombing on both sides. There was probably a little bit of romance and excitement and zest, and this kissing is hot, and the dates were chemistry and fireworks and all of the things. And like part of us knows like, oh, like if it starts like that, like maybe it's toxic. There is a little element of love bombing that 100% is not toxic, or is toxic, but it doesn't have to be toxic. I'm sure there's many relationships out there that have started off with a lot of romance and a lot of chemistry and a lot of like bing bang shaboom. But this first category is kind of expressing the fact that it doesn't have to be all bad for you to walk away. It doesn't have to be all bad for you to recognize that it's not good for you. So, first point is emotional avoidance. We love it. We want to live in a world where we don't have to deal with our own problems. We really, really do. We want to blame the other person. We want to, project that they're the problem. We also don't want to deal with our personal pain points. We often will manifest this as convincing ourselves that a painful love is still right for us. So this has a deeper layer to it, which will be touched on throughout the entire episode. But I really just want to point out that a lot of the time we have these underlying belief systems about ourselves that we are trying to avoid. This has to be dealt with. There is a lack of self-worth that is coming from trauma that we've been through, emotional neglect that we've experienced, and it is then manifesting in our lives as repeating patterns. Okay, second subtopic, pattern recognition. How many times have you been in this situation, my love? You are subconsciously creating a dynamic that feels familiar to you because that is what you are used to. This can be stemmed from trauma. This can be stemmed from childhood trauma or trauma within relationships. Maybe you've been in a very, very toxic relationship that you were manipulated in or was just not great. And then therefore you're recreating that feeling, that desire that situation gave you because that's a valid human experience. We seek familiarity, and oftentimes we can recognize these patterns, but we don't know how to fix them because there is an element of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin that it feels like our body needs to feel attached to somebody, to feel connected to another person, to feel love from another person. And that's what that love bombing does to especially an anxious attachment style person from an avoidant partner. Typically, of course, they can be complex. So maybe it's an anxious avoidant mixture in both sides, but maybe one presents more anxious, the other presents more avoidant in this particular situation. But nonetheless, there is something that is going awry in this connection. And if it is a pattern that has been repeated, it is something that you have to look at and be cautious about, because there's something in that your body really, really wants. And it's probably just that heightened state of love bombing that makes you feel connected to another person. This is something a lot deeper that you have to be curious about and recognize. Again, this is not a blame, shame, or guilt situation, because I've been in this situation many, many times, and it wasn't until I discovered some different things about myself. There is a way to have that love bombing, intense emotional experience that you are desiring in a healthy way, but we have to recognize that a lot of the time people that are going to give us that are probably going to then ghost us or separate from us or avoid us or, distance themselves from us. And ultimately, that's just going to lead you down a train of torture, my love. Take things slowly. Take things slowly. It's hard, but it's definitely my biggest advice, especially for an anxious attachment style person. And that leads us into the next subpoint, which is a feeling of security. So staying in a toxic relationship can feel like there's a form of security behind it, even if it's painful, because we're used to this person, we're used to this dynamic, we've formed this relationship with this person, and there's a sense of security because they're there and they have provided us love before. They have given us what we've asked for before. They have showed up for us before. They have done these things before. So hopefully they'll do it again. And that again comes into it's not all bad. Of course it's not all bad. Of course it's not. But if somebody is continuously making you feel confused, continuously making you wonder if they're going to show up for you, you give them a boundary, you give them something that you want them to come to, you ask them for something, and they continuously flip-flop back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It is utterly confusing because on one side there is a sense of security because they've done it before and it's made you feel good and made you have trust in them and made you feel like they can do it, but then there's the other side of them that just doesn't show up sometimes. They don't do the things that they say they're going to do. They don't have a level of consistency. And so you're craving this consistency because they've done it before and you know that they're capable of doing it, but they just don't sometimes. You want that level of security because it's there as a potential. That is not to blame them. They obviously have their own shit going on in their life that makes them very confused with love, makes them not able to be consistent, and you have to recognize what role that you are playing in this. You have to recognize, why are you staying with somebody that is so deeply inconsistent? The harder truth, stepping away, requires courage and accountability from your side, and to treat yourself properly and to show up for yourself, but stepping away from something that sometimes gives you security for the feeling of being lonely, for the feeling of not knowing who's going to come into your life next, who's going to be next, who's going to love you after them, who are you going to be with after them. There's a sense of security because they have a face. They have a body and you can touch them and they're in front of you. But stepping away, there's a lack of knowing what's next. And so there's a real sense of courage and accountability on your side to recognize that that is not good for you. This situation is not good for you. And stepping away is good for you, even if there is a lack of insecurity of knowing who's going to be next. That is really, really difficult to face. I'm here with you. I've been there, and it's made me stay in toxic relationships for way too long because I'm like, well, who's going to love me? Who's going to love me? And how sad is that, my love? How sad is that to be in that situation and think that nobody else is going to love you, or who are you going to find? Well, one, you're going to find yourself again. You're going to find security within inside of yourself. You're going to feel not bewildered and confused 24/7 by this situation that is throwing you left and right and left and right and left and right. You're going to sit with yourself and come back to yourself and hopefully gain some knowledge and some insight and not repeat the same pattern again. Here's the thing that I want you to ask yourself after this section. Are you staying because you genuinely believe this relationship can grow, or because leaving would force you to face the unknown? Moving on to the second section, which is ego protection. Woo! Woo! Hot topic. The word ego, anytime it's in anything, everyone's like, oh my goodness, we gotta not have any ego, blah, 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 blah. You have an ego, you're human. You have a sense of self-preservation because you are a human, and you're probably not going to become a monk in a monastery and never, have to think about the next meal that you're going to eat or the people in your life. And you probably want to get married and have kids. Maybe not, who knows? I'm just saying. But if you're watching this, you probably want a relationship, and You have self-preservation because you are a human. But when it comes to ego protection, sometimes this can come from very deep, traumatized, or twisted mindsets that are also consumed by the internet space of self-blame and self-detriment that can make us stay in toxic relationships. So the first subpoint in this is emotional dependence. And that is identifying yourself with a role or being a particular type of person. So whether that's you're identifying with a role within inside of the relationship, you're his partner, you're his savior, you're his caretaker, you're his lover, you're his girlfriend, whatever you want to call yourself, you're identifying with that role, and there's something about being in that role that gives you a sense of dependence within inside of yourself, feeling like you're needed, feeling like you're wanted. But separate from the relationship and a role within inside of a relationship, you could identify as somebody that doesn't give up, that doesn't abandon other people, and is somebody that just works so hard to have a loving relationship, and that's your identity. Like, you are, bringing this into the second point, on a pursuit of endurance. So this could look like, if I leave, I have to admit that I've failed. I don't give up on people. I'm not like my mom, my dad, my sibling, whoever that has given up on somebody. You may identify as weak if you give up on a relationship, or even have this narrative because they've been through a traumatizing situation that if you give up on them, you're just going to be like everyone else that has hurt them. That is equally as toxic as staying for your own malicious subconscious reasons. Is maybe they also have manipulated you into thinking that if you leave, they're going to hurt themselves. They're going to be in high amounts of pain because their mom abandoned them, or their dad abandoned them, or somebody has hurt them in the past, and you don't want to identify with somebody that hurts another person. That also is coming from a high ego superiority complex, that you are above other people, and because you're above other people, you don't hurt people, you only love people, you only accept people. And even if that means that you are going to stay in a toxic relationship, just not to identify with somebody that hurts another person. But this is not coming from mutual love and respect. This is coming from wanting to prove one's character. The next subpoint is, if I leave, I was wrong about him or her or them. Admitting the relationship is harmful feels like admitting failure or poor judgment. We never want to be a poor judge of character, right? We always want to come to our friends and be like, yeah, he's like so perfect and lovely and kind, and like, you know, he's just such a good boyfriend, even though in the back of your brain you're like, he's cheated on me 3 times and always makes me feel lost and abandoned and confused, and I never know if he actually loves me or cares about me, but he's such a good boyfriend because like he like buys me flowers occasionally, and like, oh my goodness, look how cute his text messages are to me, and like sorry, I'm like getting into this voice, but you don't want to admit that you were naive, maybe, or even worse, that you were foolish. But I'm telling you that you are not naive. You are not foolish. You are human. And humans are complex creatures that get into relationships with other complex human beings that are weird, and it's just confusing. But do not stay in something that does not add value to your life and is constantly making you feel like you're on a roller coaster of emotional craziness, just because you want to validate your original choice or be right at the beginning. Like, you thought he was amazing, you thought he was emotionally intelligent, you thought he was open, you thought he was curious about you and really cared about you. You don't want to be wrong about that. And sometimes that pain of being wrong, quote unquote, because you weren't wrong, you just had a misstep of character judgment, or are addicted to that feeling of dopamine when you're in that love bombing state. It's not that you were foolish, it's not that you were naive, it's just you're a human. But do not stay in something just because you don't want to be wrong. Next sub point is if I can make him change, it means I'm special. Ooh, don't we all want to be special? This is so talked about in so many atmospheres in this online world. I feel like this point has been talked over so many times, and it is important to recognize because there is a feeling of like validation that we want. So if you are somebody that has grown up in a toxic household where you maybe rarely received validation, or you received validation when you were condoning yourself to the manipulation of another person, this can make you feel like if you can make them change, if you can make them calm down, if you can make them show up for you by saying like all of the right things, then it means that you're special. And it means that everything was right and you were right on their character and everything's okay because, they picked you, and that makes you feel good about yourself. So, with all of that being said, you want to inspire this transformation, which also feeds a sense of superiority and uniqueness because you inspired that change inside of him. If you could just be the one that makes him stop drinking, if you can just be the one that stops him from smoking weed every day, if you could just be the one that shows up for him and gives him a sense of ambition to achieve his goals, if you could just be that one that, makes him feel good, then it means that you're special. This can also circulate in a mindset of, quote unquote, no one else could handle him, but I can. He just needs someone who understands him like I do. Staying becomes less of a connection and more about proving your worth through fixing another person. And my love, nobody can fix another person. He is not a project. No one is a project. She's not a project. They're not a project. No one's a project. The only person that can incentivize change is themselves. They have to seek it. Of course you can inspire other people. Of course you can. That's a beautiful part of being a human being. We're all intertwined in this like weird soup of life. And one thing that I say can give you some inspiration and make you pop up and encourage you to go after the day. That's a beautiful thing. But if you're consistently feeling like you've got to fix him by doing all of the right things and saying all of the right things and sending him all of the right reels and podcasts, there is something a little bit more deeply rooted here that needs to be addressed within inside of yourself. You are not anybody's savior. And you're definitely not going to transform another person if they do not want to be transformed. Next sub point, I've already given too much to walk away. Well, are you just going to torture yourself for the rest of your life? Are you just going to be in a 25-year-long relationship and wonder why you didn't stay after 6 months because you just put too much work into it? I'm making a joke. It's not funny. But this is known as the sunk cost fallacy. This is a tendency to stick with something just because of how much time, effort, and emotion you've already put into it. So your ego is clinging to the idea that staying gives meaning to the sacrifices and the suffering that you've already been through. Staying feels like the answer to all of the problems that you've already been through. It's like if you just stay, then all of the things that you've been through have some sort of explanation because you're still together. But I'm telling you, 6 months is not that long. A year is not that long. A year and a half is not that long. Yes, of course, if you're getting into the 2-year mark, the 3-year mark, the 4 or 5+ mark, this is way more intense. I see you, especially if you are a female and you'd like to have children one day. You feel this sense of pressure, this time clock that you want these things by a certain time because your body is also telling you that you have to have the things by a certain time. Society is telling you that you have to have the things by a certain time. But if you've only been in something for less than a year and a half, And it's been torturous in many different respects. My love, step away, heal, figure out, be curious about yourself, and recognize your patterns to not allow this to happen again. If it does, it's okay. We learn, we grow. There's no shame. But learn and grow and get out of something sooner. I have now been in situations where previously it would have gone on for 6 months to a year, where I've recognized these patterns within inside of myself and the other person. I'm still getting in them. I've still been in them, but I'm getting out after like a month. I'm like, okay, you know what? We're seeing these patterns. We got to get the hell out before 6 months goes by, a year goes by, and we're repeating long-term like it's just, we have to recognize our patterns sooner rather than later. And this is a long process. There is no shame in taking your time to figure this out. Moving into the next sub point, number 5, ending it would destroy the image that I've built. So this is especially common in public relationships, whether that's literally posting it on social media. Maybe you have a social media following, or you have a large friend group and you guys have been together and you guys have mutual friends, and there's like this feeling of disappointment or embarrassment involved with stepping away from a relationship that so many people know about. This can trigger feelings of failure, and the internal logic around it could be, quote unquote, people admire us, we're a power couple, if I leave, I destroy that identity, not just privately, but also publicly. So there's shame involved, there's blame involved, there's, fear of other people's judgment, fear of, people assuming things about you, assuming things about the other person. Maybe you're afraid that this person you're with is going to tell other people that you're emotionally unstable, or you have done this, or you've made this mistake, or they're going to tell some embarrassing secret about you. They're going to out you in some sort of way. So there's this feeling of vulnerability of this relationship failing that really is triggering. And your ego wants to resist the death of a persona more than the pain of exiting a relationship that is not adding value to your life. The last sub topic of this section, which is probably the deepest pain point for me, is maybe I'm not lovable. It feels easier to blame circumstances or the partner than to face the core fears that you are not lovable. A lot of the time, this stems from trauma, whether that's bullying, complex childhood trauma, relationships that have been in similar situations of just yo-yoing, abuse, emotional neglect. These types of situation can definitely trigger feelings of inadequacy and not being lovable. And this internal logic could be, quote unquote, if I leave, I have to face the possibility that I'm the problem, or that I can never find better, or that this means nobody will ever love me, nobody ever cares about me, nobody ever has cared about me, nobody has ever loved me. And it can just be a spiraling mess of not feeling loved. The ego is resisting that deep fear and vulnerability, and it's also holding on to the hope that this relationship will provide some sort of self-worth. So there is a lack of self-worth. We spoke about this in one of the above subgroups, and it is a very, very deep issue inside of the self that we do not feel acceptable, we do not feel lovable, we do not feel wanted, and this really has to be worked on over time. Absolutely, of course, we are all humans and we all desire deep human connection to feel a sense of love in our lives, but we have to understand that these toxic relationships are not going to provide us a level of security and the level of safety, the level of love that we actually need to feel safe. And they definitely will not provide a sense of self-worth. Of course, it feels lovely when another person loves us. It feels lovely when somebody shows up for us, of course. But we have to have a certain level of self-worth to choose those people in our lives, especially as adults. When we are going after romantic relationships, we have to have a certain level of self-worth to not just allow anybody that wants to come into our life to come into our life, because the ability to be decisive and protect ourselves is really, really important. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a lot of resistance as well to not accept the love bombing, to not accept the intensity at which your brain would like to move in a relationship. And after all of this information, under the ego protection, again, you are lovable. You are worthy of a healthy relationship. Of course, it takes time and effort on your part, but it takes time and effort on the other person's part. And if you are putting more effort in a large part than the other person, there needs to be some reconciliation. Finding somebody that is willing to work on something with you, willing to have open and honest conversation with you is possible, but we have to show up for ourselves. We have to be advocates for ourselves, and we can't allow these toxic modes of ego protection to control us. We have to see them, we have to recognize them, and communicate with another person about them as well, because who knows, they probably have them too. Moving into the second last category, which is the illusion of control. Now, everything that I've spoken of thus far can be connected. They're not individual pieces. Everything is multifaceted and deeply connected to one another. The ego protection and the illusion of control are also very deeply intertwined, so just take that into consideration. I've got 4 points here. First one, if I communicate better, this won't happen again. All right, so we believe that our words, actions, or the way that we carry ourselves, or our tone of voice, or how we say something can single-handedly fix the dysfunction. We think that if we just communicate better, if we just show up better, if we just learn about ourselves better, if we just watch all of the right videos, if we just learn all of the techniques, 5 ways to fix this avoidant man, if we just take on all of these techniques, then we'll be able to make this relationship work. This can look in some internal logic as, quote unquote, if I stay calm, if I explain it right, if I try harder, he won't lash out and leave me. He won't run away. He won't avoid me. He'll show up on time. So this idea that your partner's behavior is controllable by your actions can give us a false sense of safety. This can also lead us down a train of a lot of self-blame and shame, because we are constantly analyzing everything that we do. We are constantly nitpicking ourselves. We're constantly blaming ourselves for saying the wrong thing, or showing up in the wrong way, or doing the wrong thing. And we're trying to manipulate ourselves to be the person that the other person needs. We are clinging to an illusion of being wanted by another person if we show up in the way that we think that they want us. It's not healthy. The next subpoint is, if I make him love me, I'll prove I am worthy. So this can also be connected to the point in the ego protection of, if I make him change, I'm special. But it's coming from an internal logic of, if I'm good enough, supportive enough, forgiving enough, he'll change for me. So this is really coming from, again, a behavior type of mindset, where if you think that you're going to show up in a particular way, that he'll change his behavior, and you'll get this validation that you are seeking, that you are worthy of being loved, you are worthy of being chosen. The next sub point is, quote unquote, he acts this way because of his trauma. I understand it, so I can manage it. So we are mistaking empathy. We are empathizing with him because we recognize he has trauma. He has been through certain things. We see that. We've tried very hard to understand him and empathize with him and be supportive of him. We are mistaking that empathy for control over his healing process. So we think that if we can show up and be there and support him enough that he will heal, and then that will fix the relationship toxicity that we are in. We then forgive him for certain things, or we provide too much lenience on his behavior. He doesn't mean it this way. If I stay, he'll feel safe enough to change. He'll feel safe enough to grow or be better or understand himself more or dive into this trauma deeper and heal. He'll feel safe. We are trying to control another person's process of healing because ultimately we want something from him or her or them. We want something from them. We want to be loved by them. We want the relationship with them. We want to have all of the things with them. So we think that if we just endure to show that he is worthy of love through his trauma, then we will get all of the things that we want. We are trying to control the situation by influencing another person's healing process by enduring the toxicity. The next sub point is, quote unquote, if I leave, he wins. If I stay, I'm still in control. So this is an illusion of control because you are framing the relationship as a power struggle that you can win. You want to leave in your terms. If you leave, you want to leave in your terms, not because he's trying to end things. It makes you feel deeply out of control when he's the one ending things, but it makes you feel in control when you're the one ending things. You want to end things on your term. So everything is this power struggle, tug and pull between you two and your emotional state of mind. So this can be in some internal dialogue. He doesn't get to walk away with power. I'll leave him when I'm ready, not when he wants me to, or not when he wants to. Staying becomes about timing, control, and pride, not emotional health, care, love, and genuinely just wanting to work on things together and show up for each other. All of these illusions of control are forms of psychological coping mechanisms, especially for people that grew up in toxic households, have experienced childhood trauma or relationship trauma as adults, and they're rooted in a belief that if you can control the environment, you won't get hurt. A protective mechanism that once kept you safe, maybe it's controlling your behavior so that way somebody doesn't physically hurt you, controlling your behavior so that way you don't get yelled at, controlling your behavior because you are told that this is what they want from you in some manipulative form. You have this subconscious belief that if you control your behavior and show up in the way that you think the other person wants you to, you will get what you want, you will stay safe, and you will get the love that you are desiring. But all of these illusions of control are just keeping you stuck in the frame of mind that you have control. Not to get all deep and philosophical, but there is nothing outside of you. This feeling of control that you are desiring is a deep sense of feeling in control within inside of yourself, feeling like you have a sense of control about your own emotions, your own life. And I deeply encourage you to create the structures, create the mechanisms, create the discipline for yourself that makes you feel stable, secure, and safe. Of course, we all crave love from another person or multiple people, familial, relational, romantic. We are human beings and we are craving intimacy with other human beings, but creating a sense of stability and safety for yourself so that way you're not seeking it outside of you is really important. Not from a deep emotional pain point. Of course, in relationship, maybe there wants to be a little bit more of a dominant situation. Maybe there wants to be a little bit more of a submissive situation. That's fine. But it needs to be coming from a safe and healthy situation and dynamic, not out of fear of emotional abandonment. Just gonna fix the lighting situation here. So that leads us down into the very last category. This one is a little bit of a different one in comparison to the ones that I've already mentioned, and that is masochism. There may be some internal judgment on that word or misunderstanding of that word. It's oftentimes associated with BDSM, which is bondage, dominance, submission, and masochism. Sadism and masochism are interconnected. Sadists are craving to give pain to other people, and masochists are craving to receive pain from other people. And if you are identifying with anything that I have already mentioned inside of this video, there may be a part of you that is craving emotional pain or physical pain, but it's manifesting in emotional pain because desiring physical pain is maybe taboo or not acceptable by society. And I deeply, deeply encourage you to do research on BDSM. I know it's taboo. I thought for a very long time it was just some deep, dark, sex, weird kink stuff that like you have to wear like leather and like be tied up in ropes and chains. And of course it can involve all of that. And if that's your thing, then freaking yeah, like I love that for you. But like it doesn't have to involve that. Masochism is oftentimes stemmed from childhood trauma or some form of trauma. And I guess I should just explain a little bit about what it is. And it's a tendency to seek out, tolerate, or derive a sense of satisfaction from pain, humiliation, or suffering, especially when that suffering is emotional or relational. So the term originally comes from this man called Leopold, I cannot say this man's last name, von Sacher Masochist. I'm so sorry. I will write it in the description. But he was a 19th century writer whose novels featured characters who found pleasure in being degraded or emotionally tormented. The term was later adopted by psychologists to explore deeper behavioral and emotional patterns. So this is where masochism, the word, the term, the idea came from. In subconscious relational dynamics, masochism can look like repeatedly choosing emotionally unavailable or critical partners, equating emotional turmoil with passion or intimacy, believing that your role in love is to endure, feeling more comfortable when you are chasing somebody than when you are being loved in a pure form. So all of these things are related to everything I've already spoken about. Over time, when you've experienced trauma and repeated patterns of similar situations to the one that you're in, or learned this way as a child, this is internalized as part of a blueprint for intimacy. So that's maybe why our brain is having that dopamine rush, that serotonin rush, that oxytocin bonding when we are experiencing that love bombing. They pull away, they separate, they do whatever they're doing that gives us that sense of torment. We go back, we seek that validation, we get that validation, it happens again. There's this tumultuous situation going on. But masochism is not about being weak or dramatic. It's often the result of a deep psychological condition where love, value, and suffering have become intertwined. It's also changeable once those internal links are brought into the light and addressed. So when I started looking into BDSM, it literally just like came into my atmosphere very organically, and again had all of these misconceptions about it. When I started diving into the deeper psychology behind a lot of these things, so many things in my life started to click. I didn't have to watch another podcast about how to heal my spiritual bypassing, or have to watch another podcast about anxious attachment style. And of course, consuming this information is very valuable, but sometimes there's just a missing link, and that missing link is sometimes very taboo. There are very, very healthy, long-term, happy relationships that involve a sense of masochism. And it's okay if you're into that. For me personally, I have recognized that I actually need a sense of banter. I really, really need that. I need somebody to call me out on my shit. I need somebody to, maybe call me some names. I've agreed to this. I've consented to it. It's not coming from this state of abuse and trying to put me down, but it's actually fulfilling something inside of me. And I also crave that, giving that back. I crave calling somebody else on their own shit. I crave a sense of tumultuousness inside of a relationship. And although that may seem very unhealthy, when it's two consenting adults coming together, recognizing that they have these patterns, and these patterns actually make them feel fulfilled, and there isn't a neglect on other emotional states of being. If I come to them in this emotional state, maybe confessing that I'm feeling lonely, or I'm feeling separated, or I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling, that person shows up for me in that moment. That person cares for me in that moment. They're not calling me a bitch or making me feel like I'm too much or like whatever. It's not about that. When I come to them in my vulnerability, I feel safe. When I come to them in my heightened feelings of brattiness or playfulness, these things can be playful. And you can get that sense of intensity that maybe you are craving from toxic relationships in a healthy relationship when two people are agreeing to a certain dynamic. So I highly encourage you to dive into that, because I know it seemed like a little bit of a a hop, skip, and a jump from the other things that I've mentioned. But as somebody that grew up in a very toxic household and grew up with sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and a lot of neglect and abandonment, I had to recognize that there is a certain intertwining of my emotional, intimate blueprint that I probably won't be able to unravel. And that's okay. When I've brought these things to the surface, when I can see them, when I recognize them, when I know where they're actually coming from, and there is a relationship, there is things that I can seek and go out into the world and specifically go after and look for in a partner, because I know what I need, and it's not emotional toxicity of we're together 1 minute, I love you 1 minute, now we're not, now we're breaking up, and now we're back together. It's not that I want. It's absolutely not that I want. I want security. I want safety. I want protection. I want the other person to show up for me when I ask for it. I want that consistency. I deeply, deeply crave those things and need those things in a relationship, as we all do. But maybe there's some playful making fun of, maybe there's a little bit of an attitude problem, maybe there's a little bit of, this call it like it is attitude that I crave in a safe and healthy relationship. I will put some links in the description box for certain things, and I really hope you guys check them out. A reminder to always be curious about yourself, stay open-minded to all things, because you never know when something is going to come into your life and provide a shift, a change, growth, and a feeling of being seen. I love you. I appreciate you. If you could, hit the like button, subscribe button, follow button, wherever you're watching this. I would truly, truly appreciate it. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. My name is Julia, and this was the Duality of Life podcast. Cheers.